Arceon is one of my favorite plugins for building, and I want to teach you how to use it. You will need to become a patron to Arcaniax to get access to this plugin. I will provide a link in the description. Once you have it ready on your server, we can start. In this video, I will be covering all masks and noise patterns that currently exist in Arceon. The first mask is the ever so popular Angle Mask. It's popular because it's quick and easy and effective. First, you're going to make your selection around whatever it is you want to mask. Typically, people like to use this with terrain. That is why I have a simple little mountain here to test this on. By the way, I have this selected, but let me just hide the selection, but it is selected. What you're going to type with that selected is replace, and we're going to use the Arc-Angle Mask. And since it's a mask, we have to enter the pattern after it, but before we do that, when you do the Arc-Angle Mask, you do have to define the start and end angle, or the minimum angle and maximum angle. So if you look at this little guide I have at the top, or I have the 0 degrees, 5 degrees, 30 degrees, 60 degrees, that's just to show you kind of how the angles might look when you're not typing it out. It's looking for blocks within those ranges. So if I did from 0 degrees to, I have to put these in brackets, to 30 degrees, it's going to be masking any blocks that fit within that angle range. Think of the blocks actually being angled in that direction. So in this range, any blocks on a vertical edge are not going to get masked. And then we're going to replace it with 57 to see what it does. So you'll see it's replacing anything that fits within that 0 to 30 range, 0 being the flattest planes on top. With that being said, if I were to mask something with a minimum range of, let's say, 5, and we can go a little bit less than 30 just so we can see a difference here. Let's do 25, 5 and 25, and we'll make this 41. Now it's going to mask anything between that and a little bit less than that, and here is the results you get. It's not going to cover any of those flat surfaces, and it's not going to quite reach the edge of where the 30 was, although those numbers are so close you can't really see much of a difference. If we did go above the 30 and did 45, it would go a little bit past where the diamond was. I hope that makes sense. The other number that we can add to this command is the range, and this can be, I think, either 1 or 2 maximum. I'm assuming 1 is the default because when I do it with the 1 and without the 1, it pretty much goes in the same places. Basically what this does is it will make it smoother or not smoother. That is what it looks like with the range of 1. With a range of 2, however, I'm going to change the block 2 for clarity. It will smooth off those edges so it doesn't have all those extra noisy parts on the ends. I hope that makes sense for the range, although typically I just leave it at the default and don't even enter it. I use this mask all the time for terrain because of how quick and effective it is. Next is the Ambient Mask, and again I'm going to hide my selection so this is easier to see. And simply put, we're just going to do the same command like we did before, but this time use ambient. And then in brackets, you're going to put, it's kind of like a range as well of what blocks are being detected. So what this mask does, well, I can explain it in a minute. Let's just leave this ambient at 1 for now. And let's do our pattern for this as 57. So what the ambient mask does is it's looking for any block that has one air block adjacent to it. So it's masking every single block that has a single air block next to it, and this is the result you get. Now when I increase that number in the range, I think it can go from 1 to 4. It's kind of changing the way it detects which blocks. Basically, the higher the number, the more it's looking for blocks that are deep in the deepest corners of your shape. So if I did a range of 2, and I'm going to change this number just so you can see the difference. It's a little bit less, but it's still in those corners. And then if I do a range of 3, let's change this again. Again, just a little bit less than the 2, but still in the corners. And then 4 is the highest, where it's just looking for any block that is very well buried. And I can show you this in a second. But it's going to look for blocks such as this one here. See how this air block that's right above it is next to 3 different blocks? That is kind of how it's detecting where those dark corners are. I guess iron wasn't the best example, but that is where those ones ended up. So that is the Ambient Mask. I haven't used it that much, but it seems really helpful for doing a quick mask like this. You can get some really neat effects with this, especially if you need the edges of a shape to kind of have a lighter or darker edge. It would be really useful for something like that. The next mask is a Y mask, and what this will do is it will replace any blocks within a certain range on the Y coordinate that you specify. Whatever my build is, I need to see what coordinates it's on. So this one goes from -60 on the Y up to -14. So now that we know the coordinates that are within this selection, then I'm going to do replace Y, and then we're going to enter the range. Since it's -60 up to -14, we just have to make sure it fits somewhere in there. So let's do -40 up to -20, and then we'll enter the block we want. And it did just replace everything in our selection. So what we're going to have to do if we wanted to only apply to the object in question, we're going to want to do a G mask of that stone first, and then enter that replace Y again, and then it will only replace those blocks in that range on that Y coordinate. So that is the Y mask. There is also the Y gradient mask that works very similarly to this. With this same command that we just did, you're just going to change the Y to the gradient, Y gradient, and then these work the same way with the minimum and maximum Y coordinate. So let's change this to be 59 up to, let's say 45. I don't know where that diamond started. And then we'll just keep the pattern the same as 57. So this is going to generate a gradient from that first Y coordinate up to the second Y coordinate, and it will look something like this. And I think whatever is the first angle you specify is the direction of the solid part of the gradient, and then it will fade away to that. But if we flipped these numbers, it might go the opposite direction. So if I said from -45 to -59, then it's going to flip it so that it's going downward instead of upward, if that makes sense. Although that time it's interesting that when I did flip them, you'll see that it's anything above the -45, it also replaced that. So I guess it is replacing everything in that solid part of the gradient, but you still need to specify where the gradient starts and stops. Next mask is the proximity mask, and this will replace blocks along the sides of the blocks, anything along that Y coordinate. So this one's a bit tricky because it actually has a mask within the mask. I mean, it's not really tricky, it's just confusing, I guess. I have this selected. I'm going to go ahead and replace, and this time do proximity. So the first thing we enter in brackets is the mask. We're masking in proximity to what block? In this case, it's going to be that diamond. But first, before I do this, I just remembered I've got to turn off my G mask because I was using that before. Okay, after we have the proximity mask, we're going to do the distance in brackets. I'm going to do distance of 4, and let's pick a dark block like black concrete. Here you can see what it's done. It's masked all of the side blocks of that diamond, and it's a great way to outline things quickly, especially if you're doing text. I know it has other uses too, but the next mask is the one that I find even more useful. And this is the proximity 3D mask. Unlike the proximity mask where that one is just masking on the sides of the blocks, the proximity 3D mask will do the same thing, but for all sides of the block. We have this selected and we're going to enter the same command, but this time let's change this to proximity 3D. And you can see that these can all be abbreviated to prox 3D or proximity 3D, whatever. They're the same thing. So proximity 3D will go on all sides. We also want to mask 57 again. We can keep the range of 4. Let's just change the block we're using to something like glass. That way we can see it better when we do place this on top. This is the result you get where all of your masked blocks are surrounded with the aforementioned distance. I actually use a similar command from Huawei just like this all the time, but I'm going to have to start using this one just because it is a lot easier to do because you're entering the mask within the same command instead of having to do a separate G mask. It is a very useful mask indeed. Something I failed to mention for both of these proximity masks is that you do need to be mindful of your selection. If there is not enough room within your selection to allow for the extension of these masks, it will get cut off. That's something to watch out for. Last few masks are very straightforward and simple. First one being the above mask. Here we have another thing to mask, and we're going to do replace, this time above, and we're going to say above what? We're going to go above the diamond. So again, all of these have a mask within the mask. It's very weird. This is our mask right here. This is this diamond or 57. And then we're going to specify the distance above. How far above do we want to mask this? Now this is cool because it basically means we could go within a range above this. So if I did 10, it's going to replace 10 blocks above all of this. And let's do that with something fun. How about yellow wool? So it replaced 10 blocks above the diamond with the yellow wool. It's a great way for stretching something, and it's pretty self-explanatory. Not much else to say about it. Then we also have the opposite of the above, which is the below mask. Works the exact same way. All I have to do if I want this to have the same outcome is change the above to below, and it's going to go below the diamond. Really simple. Also note here that it did get cut off because my selection was not big enough and I failed to notice it in the moment. So once again, pay attention to your selections. Next we have the type mask. I did cover this in another Arceon tutorial, but I thought I'd go ahead and put it back in here again, just so this is including every single mask. Here you'll see that this is a combination of oak stairs, oak slabs, and all orientations and locations. So the type masks simply will replace by a type of block that has a bunch of variant blocks within it, like stairs and slabs and buttons and things like that. In this case, this isn't a mask, but more so of a pattern because of where it's being placed in the command, but I'm not going to get too nitpicky on that. If we do replace type and change the type to something like dark oak, like this, then it's going to replace everything in there to that type. Really simple. So whatever type is supported currently in the type replace, I'm sure more will be added to this as more blocks come out, but currently this is all the stuff that type replace has, which is another command I already covered. But that's essentially what you could probably use this command for as well, as long as you know how to type it out. There isn't an autocomplete in this, which would be nice, but currently I have to kind of guess how it's named. So if I wanted to do prismarine, I would have to type that all out myself. That is the type mask. I forgot about this one, but there is also the color mask, and I did talk about this one also in a previous video, but I'll mention it here again since it is a mask type in Arceon. And what it does is with this selected, it is selected currently, any block that has a color to the name, so like this has red candles, red bed, red concrete, red terracotta, red glazed terracotta, anything that has a color assigned to it, you can replace it based on the type of color. So I can do replace, and you can do CC or color. CC meaning color change. So we can say replace from red, and we can type it again to another color like orange, and it will replace all of those blocks based on color. Again, this only works for blocks that have all of the color variants included in them. It wouldn't work for something like red nether brick, for example, but it's still a neat mask and great for experimenting with colors, especially if you just want to see the difference really quickly. And of course, you don't have to enter it twice. If you wanted to replace everything in there, you don't really have to do that. I don't know why I did that the first time, but you could also just do this, and that works too, as long as you're okay with replacing everything in your selection. Let's move on to all of the different noise types in Arceon. I have examples of all of these up here, but we'll also see them in action on this little square. I have this selected. The hill isn't exactly necessary, but I thought it would be more fun just to have some shape on this. I'll start by showing the noise pattern, and then after that I'll show you the noise mask for each one. First, let's go over the turbulent pattern. Remember, for a pattern, you're either using set or replace with a single argument. There's probably other things too that you use patterns for. Those are just the two basic ones that I'm using as examples. But anything that uses a pattern as an argument, it's going to be using this version. So we're going to do replace with a noise type, and this one is turbulence. So we can do turbulence or turb for short. And the arguments for a noise pattern are the noise type, scale, pattern, and seed. So for this one, let's do a scale of 2. And we'll do a pattern next. So this is the blocks that are going to be used in the noise pattern. Let's do 35, 4 and 35, 5. So that's yellow wool and lime green wool. There's also an optional argument for the seed if you wanted to put a random number in there as a seed. That way it's going to be using the same seed each time. Otherwise, the seed is always random. We'll just keep it as a random seed for now and enter that. So you can see that it's replaced everything in our plot with that noise pattern. And you'll see it's using both of those colors I specified as a noise pattern. And that is something very important to note as a difference between the masks and the patterns. I'll get to that in a minute. But first I wanted to show you that when changing things like the scale on this, going higher with the scale is going to zoom in on it. It's going to enlarge it. Whereas with a mask, going larger is going to zoom out. It's a little bit confusing, the differences. Usually though, I'm not even thinking about it when I'm using these commands. I'm just typing them out and guessing things and just seeing what looks good to me. This is actually the first time I even knew that there was a difference myself. So anyway, you got that. And again, if you wanted to put a seed there, it's going to pick a random seed, but now it's going to keep using that seed if I wanted to change other parameters. Let's say I wanted to put a third block in here. Let's say I wanted to do 35, 3 as well. Then it's going to keep that same seed, but add another block type to it. You can see it's kind of tracing around the existing pattern. Or even if I take that out and just change the scale of this to something a little bit lower, you can see it's taking that same pattern and just scaling it down, that same seed. I'm getting my terms mixed up. When I'm saying pattern, I meant seed. So that is the turbulence noise pattern. Now to use the turbulence noise mask, we're going to take the same thing and modify it a bit. So for a mask, the parameters are zoom and coverage only. We don't have this option for seed. We don't have this option for pattern because we enter the pattern as a separate entity in the command. So turbulence, this will be zoom. I'm going to do a zoom of 2. And then we have coverage. 50% coverage is the default. And I think you can enter the command without typing it, but I'm just going to type it for sake of example. And then let's do 35, 1 as our pattern. So this is how you type it out as a mask. You're going to have it in the mask portion of the replace command, and then your actual pattern, which is orange wool, will be after this. So let's enter that and see what it does. Oh yes, so what it did is it replaced basically everything in my selection with that noise mask. But there is a way around this. Let's undo that, and we're going to do a G mask of existing. This is a fallaway mask, I believe. Very useful, but yeah, I wasn't planning on showing that. There's a bonus for you. So now it's going to mask all of the existing blocks in here, excluding air blocks. And let's run that command again. Replace with this mask with this block. It's a bit confusing because typically when you use replace, you're replacing one block with another block, but in this case, it's using it as a mask, saying we're replacing over everything with this noise. And that's exactly what it's going to do. It's just going to replace on top of all of those blocks, but you'll see it's kind of got this transparent part of the noise. It's just overlaying on top of that existing noise. I'm sorry if I'm over-explaining this. I just feel like it's a little bit confusing at first, but I hope that the visual helps you see it. All right, so that was with a coverage of 50%. I just want to show you what it looks like with a little less coverage. So that's 10% coverage right there. Yeah, if we zoom out, let's do 4, and let's change the coverage back to 50. Yeah, there you see it's a much smaller noise type there. Oh, also I should mention this. So you know how we use 2 blocks for the noise pattern? Well, for a mask, since that's not even part of this mask, this pattern is only going to be affected where it was before. So if I do 35, 6 and 35, 1, it's just going to do a 50-50 of those blocks on that same noise pattern type. It just works a little differently. I don't really know how best to explain it, but that's what it does. So quick recap, this mask uses a zoom, and the zoom will go out with a higher number, and it also uses coverage, and it only requires you enter 1 block for the pattern at minimum. And then we have the pattern type, which if I can find it, here it is. it uses a scale, which the higher the number, it zooms in. And then it has at least 2 blocks as the pattern. And then it has a seed. So they're just typed out a little differently. Most of these are exactly the same except for that noise type at the beginning. Those are the main differences between the two. All right, let's move on to electric. This should be pretty easy because it's going to be the same as before. I'm actually going to take my other command that I had here. So this was the turbulence one, and just change this to electric. It's going to work the exact same way. We've got our scale. Let's just set that to 2. Let's keep this the same. We don't really need the seed specified. We just need this. And I can enter that and see if I like it. Looks good. You can always adjust things as needed. But again, with this one, when you add extra blocks to it, actually that was the same block, hold on. When you add actual additional blocks to it, it's going to add more splotches to that noise. Whereas when you do that with the mask, it's going to kind of combine them in the 50-50 noisiness, if you will. So that was an electric pattern. Let's do an electric mask. We're going to change this turbulence to electric. We can keep all of this and keep all of that. There we go. Looks nice. This looks like paint balls just splattered everywhere. It's kind of fun. Fractal works the same way as turbulence and electric. We're going to start with a pattern. Just change electric to fractal, or frac for short. And you've got the zoom and the pattern type. And again, if you wanted to specify seed, you can here. But let's go ahead and enter that and see what that does. Remember, scaling up is going to zoom in on this. So let's scale this up to 4. Looks good. And then we're going to do a fractal mask. And here we go. Here's the other mask. Let's change this to be frac. Also, let's try something different. Let's do 80% coverage and see what that does. I don't like it, actually. Let's try something a little smaller, like 30%. There we go. Something a little different, but it's just placing on top of the existing blocks. Remember, we do have our existing G mask. Otherwise, it would be replacing everything in our selection. Yeah, looks pretty cool. As you can see, those first 3 are very similar, but these last 3 do have some differences from those, and that is why I put them last. First of all, we have this crack mask. You can see the type of pattern it makes. Looks great for creating little cracks and stuff in a mountain or whatever it is you're making. And currently, this only comes in a mask in Arceon, so there is no pattern for this. So we're going to do crack, and on this, it's exactly the same. We've got our zoom, we've got our coverage, but then we also get a third one with this. We get jitter. So jitter by default is 70%. I'll enter this first and see what this does. All right, so that's actually really zoomed in, and I want to zoom out on that a bit. So to zoom out, I'm going to change this to a higher number. Let's try 2. Okay, that's a little bit better. And I think I want to change my coverage also. The nice thing about the mask is you can keep layering it on top of itself. So you can just keep continuously be adding this on top of itself. I guess that's another neat thing about it. Okay, enough of that. I'm gonna go back to this, and then I'm gonna do 100% coverage with this because this is, yeah, it already has a lot of gaps in it. But anyway, what the jitter does is the higher the jitter, the less grid-like it is. The lower the jitter, the more grid-like it is. Actually, this will be easier to show with less jitter first. So if I change this to be 10% jitter, you can see it's almost like squares across. If I change it to be 0 jitter, or 0%, I guess, almost perfectly straight lines in a grid-like pattern. But if you make it go higher, like 80%, they're gonna get more wild and crazy and, I don't know, more jittery. So that is what jitter does, and that is the crack mask. Again, it only comes in a mask. Although I'm sure if I didn't have my G mask on and I ran this command in my selection, yep, it's going to create something really cool like that. So that is the other thing you can do with it, create a cool honeycomb-like shape. Now I'm just curious because I'm just having fun with this. If I make this 10% or lower, oh, I don't know what you could use this for, but it does look awesome, doesn't it? Almost looks like a ruined building of some kind. I'm turning my G mask back on and I'm moving to Cell. So for these last 2, Cell and Voronoi, They both use the jitter, just like crack. So those first three don't use jitter at all. These last three do use jitter for both the pattern and the mask. So for cell, we're going to start with the pattern. Let me find the pattern that I typed before. I'm just lazy. Okay, yeah, this was the one that wasn't a true pattern, but we're going to change this to cell. And then again, we've got our zoom. I'm going to change this to something like 2. And we've got our 2 blocks. So that is the cell. Actually, we need this to go a little bit further in. Oh, I forgot. That's right. We do have jitter with this too. So because this one has jitter and it's a pattern, it's actually going to go right before the seed and after this. So normally on the other ones, this would be the seed, but on this one, this is actually the jitter. So if I change this to be, I don't know, 90%, actually, let me change it to something lower. It's easier to see. If I change it to something lower, you'll see it gets more box-like with the pattern that it's making. If I change it to 0, it's going to be very boxy, still kind of rounded on the corners, but yeah, it almost looks pixelated in a way. And if I change it to something higher, like 80, it's going to get much more organic looking. So yeah, that is jitter for that, and if you wanted to add a seed, it's going to be the 4th argument in this command. So that's the cell pattern. Let's change it into a mask now. Let me find one of the masks. All right, we're going to change this to cell, and it's going to work the same way as crack. It should have the zoom, the coverage, and the jitter, although coverage is probably too much. Yeah, see, coverage does not work at 100% with this one. So let's go back to 50% with that, and oh wow, that's very large indeed. I'm going to change that to be, so this is zoom, so zooming, so let's make it 5. And I just kind of did like a pixely type of mask on top of that. I guess I could make it anything, but let's do something like that. Yeah, honestly, with most of these, you just play around with numbers until you get something that looks good. That is cellular noise. Moving on to the final and my favorite noise type, and that is Voronoi. I'm sure you've seen me use it many a time. But let's go over the Voronoi pattern first. This one will work just like cell in that it also has the jitter parameter. So we could just keep the same command and just put VOR at the beginning for Voronoi. I do need to make a note on this one, however, that because of some conflicting noise types with Fawe, the pattern version of Voronoi can be typed out as VOR, ArcVor, or ArcVoronoi. It cannot be typed out as just Voronoi for the pattern only. The mask version, however, doesn't require the additional arc in front of it. And again, this is just because of a conflict with Fawe. To avoid any confusion, I recommend just using the VOR option for both, or reference the wiki. It is your best friend. Back to typing out this command. So we have a scale of 5, we've got our pattern here, and we've got our jitter and our seed. I don't need the seed, so I'm taking that out. And that is what that is going to create. Now this one is a little more fun to play with when you put extra blocks on it. So if I did add more blocks, like 35, oh, I have 4. Let's do 6 on top of that. It's going to put a line in the middle there. So it just generates it a little bit differently than some of the others. What if I did a 4th one? Let's do 35, 2. Also, I'm going to change this to be smaller. Okay, maybe not that small. Maybe I want to go larger instead. How about 7? I thought I added another one. It doesn't show up though. Okay, maybe you can only go up to 3 blocks. I didn't know that. I thought you could go more. But this is the pattern type. I think the mask might work a little bit differently. This pattern is useful for doing stones or ice or even scales. I've seen it used for that before. But let's move on to the mask version of this. Let's find another mask we used before, and we'll just change this to Voronoi. Let's change this to 2. Now this mask is different from the others because it doesn't use coverage at all, so we can delete that. This one just has zoom and jitter. And again, all of these are on the wiki, so you can look them up. It's a bit confusing to hear me say all the exceptions and stuff, but if you just look at the wiki and just copy what it has, it's a lot easier to do that. So we've got our scale and our jitter. And then let's just start with one block type and see what that does. All right, so it's going to put that on top of everything. If you want to see what this looks like with a smaller jitter, by the way, I guess we could try that. This one's really fun to play with the jitter on. You can make like a very grid-like thing with it, like that with 10%. If I do 100% jitter, it's going to go crazy and have a lot more filled in areas. So yeah, it's just fun to play with. Let's try this with multiple of these blocks. I'm going to start with 3 blocks. Oh, that's right. It's going to create the noise type of thing. I completely forgot. That's what happens when you add multiple blocks to a mask. It's just going to kind of mesh them all together so that it looks ugly. We'll take this off, keep the 35.1. Let's make this smaller. Yeah, so that's about as big as you can get with a Voronoi. Actually, if you wanted to go bigger than that, you could probably go into the decimals. So like 0.1. Yeah, if you did 0.1, it would be much bigger, but you can't go below 0. So 0.4 could do something like that. That's pretty cool. Anyway, that is the Voronoi noise type. And like any of these noise types, you can combine them with themselves or with each other to get something completely new. All of these are the simple noise commands that I have shown you. There is one other from Arceon that's just called a generic noise mask, but it gets complicated because it includes multiple types of noises and multiple arguments that I don't even know how to explain because I am not a mathematician. So I'm going to leave that one up to you if you want to learn more about it. I don't understand it myself, especially not well enough to explain it in the video, but that is the final noise mask in Arceon. It is just a mask, not a pattern. I know that was a lot of information, especially for these noise types, but I do want to recap real quick. All of these have a mask variant. All of these, except Crack, have a pattern variant. Crack, Cell, and Voronoi have the jitter option. Voronoi does not have a coverage option for the mask. And I think those are the main differences if I'm remembering correctly. Hopefully it wasn't too confusing, and I hope that this kind of helps you visualize the difference between all of those. I had to teach myself the difference for this video because I never really thought about it before, so I hope I'm explaining it well enough. I commend any of you who have made it to this point in the video. How patient you must be. If you would like to see any more of my Arceon tutorials, I do have a playlist with some of those, as well as other videos and playlists with even more building tips. Thank you so much for watching and have fun building!